Okay, so league start plans. Well, I mean, I'm going Pathfinder. Should you be going Pathfinder? Probably not. Just saying. But hey, I like Pathfinder. It is something I'm very familiar with, and familiarity gets you pretty far in this game. Um, and I'm looking at going Pathfinder with General's Cry. So my league start tree is going to be a little bit rough. We go for finesse, then we end up picking the gladiator's perseverance, um, art of the gladiator, martial expertise, pick up destroyer along the way, and we work our way down to call to arms because call to arms with General's Cry is amazing. Um, and then we have some different options. As far as how we go. The initial plan is to stay physical, and we are going to be using Bone Shatter. Now, you may have heard people complain about Bone Shatter. Here, let me remove the title. Bone Shatter is people are unhappy about it because when monsters are stun immune, then it does something or another, or it doesn't do something. But we don't care about that. We are using Bone Shatter with General's Cry. And this is a little bit experimental because this is definitely a undocumented feature. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a level 1 Bone Shatter to build up trauma stacks. And then we have a level 20 Bone Shatter, which we use for General's Cry. Meaning that our massive amounts of trauma stacks, let's say that we can get to 30 relatively easily, maybe get much higher than that, probably not without uniques. We can then take the high level Bone Shatter hits, except we don't take the damage because I don't think Bone Shatter combined with General's Cry makes you gain trauma stacks, which means you don't get hit. And that's a pretty big deal, right? So if we look real quick, from the skills perspective, we have the General's Cry Bone Shatter. This is a level 17. We take 105 damage per trauma stack. That's pretty rough when you've got like 30 some trauma stacks and we have a lot of duration. And the Bone Shatter that we take damage from hits us for 6. So 1/20th. And of course with physical damage, the lower the physical damage hit, the better off you are. Now one of the things you need for General's Cry is you need Desecrate. We have Desecrate cast when damage taken, because we take damage because of Bone Shatter, the low level Bone Shatter, with Spell Cascade to generate the maximum number of corpses. This also helps solve all of our power issues for the skill, right? If we always have the maximum number of corpses in range, then that makes it much easier to get to a high enough power on our General's Cry. So there's some inherent synergy to this. For the General's Cry main link, Bone Shatter, General's Cry, melee physical, brutality. I mean, if you're going physical anyway, and Bloodlust. Bloodlust is interesting because normally Bloodlust is really annoying because it only works when you have one skill that inflicts bleed and the other skill it doesn't. And for our other skill, we have Bone Shatter, increased duration, level 1 Bone Shatter, yeah. High level increased duration, faster attack, and rage. And then on the tree, we pick up bleed damage over here and bleed chance. So against single targets, I mean, because our little Bone Shatter hits all the time, we're going to get a tiny bleed off on them, which allows us to have a really good more damage multiplier in our main link. Our plan is to use a two-hander at this point. It works just as well with a one-hander. There's some different options around it. We get duration here, we get duration here, we have the more duration up here. Here's decent physical damage node. 12%, 14%, 25%. It's okay. It's on the way. We pick up the extra rage down here. we use Battle House for damage taken recouped as mana. Hopefully this will fix our mana issues. If not, we can double up by taking the Mastery. So we have 20% of damage taken recouped as mana. You know, even with like 30 stacks, right, we're still going to get hit by a decent chunk, because 30 times 6 is a couple hundred points. Yeah, 180 points. We'll probably get rid of most of that from armor. You can also just level up your level 1 Bone Shadow to get hit harder, and that can make it so that your spells trigger more often and you get more mana recoup as well. Right, so you can tweak things a little bit. There's definitely some tweaking going on. Other things, I'm taking Tribal Fury because I go by there anyway, and strike skills which target additional targets enemies can do from 30% further away. So let's talk through that real quick, because we're taking increased strike range here, the 30% from there, there's 2 points here, 3 points here. The reason we're picking that up is that when you're bossing, you don't necessarily want to stand next to the boss. But these can hit an additional target, you could be further away and still be building up your Bone Shatter trauma stacks. It also gives you, I think, 2 chances to hit. So again, it's more likely to build up your Bone Shatter trauma stacks without negatively impacting anything else. There's nothing else really magical about this. Right, this is what you should be looking at end of acts. We are not using any uniques. I think that rolling a decent physical weapon using the new harvest crafting system from a League Star perspective is probably going to be pretty decent. Right, just shove in a weapon, roll 10 times until something decent shows up. You don't need a whole lot. Bone Shatter has a lot of built-in damage as well, because we're leveling the Bone Shatter that does the actual damage. This number is relatively low. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is our gear. We have a good 2-handed physical axe, and we have a basalt flask and a granite flask. Yeah, that's our gear right now. Our stats are fixed mostly. We need like 14 points of int, but that's about it. And I believe the 14 points of int is needed primarily to level up our Arctic armor high enough. So we use Arctic armor, determination, precision, and then we have the desecrate, cast from damage taken, Bone Shatter, and the General's Cry Bone Shatter. I've got a 5 link in here. It can be a 4 link, right? All of these nodes do about the same, 37%, 37%, and this one is 46%. So you definitely want to prioritize Bone Shatter, General's Cry, melee physical damage, probably brutality after that, depends on what kind of axe you end up with, but you could do Bloodlust as well. And then you can add more sockets as you go along. Okay, so what if we found out that if we do the General's Cry with a level 20 Bone Shatter, we just immediately explode, right? Because we take the damage. Well, there's a couple of exits. One exit is to go elemental instead of physical. Again, not using uniques, roughly the same number of skill points. We convert 40% to fire, we convert 40% to cold. It's a little bit leaner on the tree. We're taking precise technique. We probably are going to have to take some accuracy nodes over here or elsewhere. Might be a little bit tweakier to build out, right? But this is one of the options we have on how to go. We can take these attack damage nodes, elemental attack damage nodes. We have the ones up here. All of these, this tree has a lot of resists. right? Even without gear, we're at negative 32, so we have 28 resist all elements, which is pretty decent for a tree. So that's one way that we can go. Debian Dirge, if for whatever reason you get it, you really want to go in this direction. Like Debian Dirge is probably a very good weapon for the setup. You have very different links, of course, but yeah, you kind of have to just tweak it depending on what you get and go with that. You can also go poison. So what we're doing in this particular case is we're going Viper Strike and what's his buddy? Pestilence Strike? So Viper Strike has a 30% less attack speed if dual wielding. So it's actually a very slow attack, right? And it hits with both weapons when you're dual wielding. I think that you can use Viper Strike, combine it, put that on the General's Cry. You do have to fix your corpse generation now. And then you can use Pestilence Strike as your right-click attack skill. Your Pestilence Strike will push out a whole bunch of these poison debuffs, and your Viper Strikes will put some pretty decent numbers out there. That's one way to go. More synergy with the Pathfinder Ascendancy, because we are going full Chaos Conversion at that point. But, you know, this is kind of like a safer exit than the other ones. And the last one I looked at was Reeve. The new Reeve has more damage. What we could do is Vaal Reeve, and then use the normal Reeve to get the benefits of the Vaal Reeve area of effect, right? We have all the stacks from the Vaal Reeve, then we have the normal Reeves that are going off all the time, and the only thing that we have to do, because the normal Reeves would be in the General's Cry, so you should pretty good clear. It's a little bit different. You're probably going to look at Sword and Shield at that point. Maybe you have to go Elemental Conversion. I don't know. There's a couple of gotchas to be aware of, though. One of those is that if we are going Reeve, then and we end up with Swords, or we do any of the Elemental Conversion bits, Trinity is not our friend. Trinity is a bit of a problem because it can't support triggered skills. And General's Cry is very much a trigger skill. So that's something to be aware of. So yeah, plan A. Let's go with this. And then what we start doing after we level, want to look at kind of where we're at, right? Do we need more damage? Do we need more life? Are we getting blown up by spells? If we get blown up by spells, we end up taking some spell suppression. We take this leg over here. We take this leg over there. This is going to be 13% spell suppression. Oh no, it's about 10% spell suppression. This guy is going to be more than 10% spell suppression. So these 1, 2, 3, 4 points is going to be a pretty decent chunk of spell suppression. These 4 points are also going to be a good chunk of spell suppression. Between that and gear, they might already be there. I don't know. You probably can also use a quartz flask for another 12. It's not the most exciting 12%. But you know, it's an option. So that's one way to go. If you want more damage, there's also places for more damage. But this might be a pretty safe route to build up some tankiness with the spell suppression. Right now, we're at 107. So we're in our 80s at that point. That's still pretty spendy. We got some more life. Life on the tree, 86%. Want to get a bunch more. We have access to an easy dual socket here. We have access to an easy dual socket here. filling out both those jewel sockets, we can probably get rid of the bleed damage and bleed chance, right? We can just grab a jewel that has chance to bleed and increase life. Two-stat jewel removes these 2 points, gets more life. And yeah, we just kind of have to feel it out a little bit and see how well everything works. Once we get to the point where trade is kicking up more and there's options, getting more trauma stacks is the way to scale. Faster attacks, self-chill. There's lots of ways to get to self-chill. One of the ways is because we get hit by physical damage anyway, we can convert some of the physical damage taken to cold damage, and it should line up pretty well with the ability to then go for a self-chill setup. I mean, there's some decent, unique two-handers that are not very popular because they have a really terrible attack speed. The really terrible attack speed isn't a huge issue for this build. Like, yes, we want to attack a lot, but our main attack links is pretty fast attacking, whereas our backup attack links can do most of the heavy lifting. And yeah, I think this is gonna work out well. I mean, it has a lot of damage potential. It has a lot of scaling potential in the long run. It has a decent amount of travel on the tree, but I think that by the time you're at the end of the act, you're mostly done traveling. There's lots of opportunity to pick up some pretty sweet nodes. You can pick up more nodes here, increased accuracy, movement speed, might be worth it. We can go for warrior training, area of effect, melee strike range, physical damage with two-handed weapons, 25%. It's pretty decent. 5% attack speed. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to pick up easy life, easy damage. Like, we shouldn't have much travel left after we get to this point, just by flushing out the points that we're close to. We do a lot of the travel early on though, because we do want to take deep breaths. Deep breaths is a pretty big deal. Just 30% war cry cooldown recovery rate is just a pretty big multiplier on your damage. So picking this up, picking up call to arms, picking up natural authority, and the extra cooldown recovery is pretty good. And I think our war cry has a 2.1 second cooldown. It should be plenty. Our attacks are going to be relatively slow. If our attacks are too slow, then we got a problem. But I don't think it's going to be an issue. We should be able to build up rage with our normal bone shatter attacks, which will help out. We have a fair amount of attacks speed on the tree already. And yeah, we have some clear. We have some good clear in case you get surrounded. It kind of depends on the league mechanic. Like, some of these guys are going to spawn and are going to run behind you. Always nice that you don't have to go chase stuff down. So there's a lot of opportunity to get a lot more out of this tree without necessarily having to travel to other parts of the world. And yeah, lastly, should you be playing this as a Pathfinder? I mean, probably not. Right? Like, you could play it as an Ascendant and it'd be about as good. You can still pick up the Pathfinder nodes. Pathfinder would definitely has an edge in the exit into the poison, Viper Strike, Pestilence Strike combo. But that's the big benefit you get as a Pathfinder. The other big benefit you get as a Pathfinder, of course, is that you can stack armor relatively easily. right? We have 13,000 armor, and the reason we have 13,000 armor is we have two of the ascendancy nodes done, Nature's Boon and Nature's Adrenaline. But this 13,000 armor is an aura and a couple of flasks. If we do our next lab, we're at 16,000 armor. I mean, it will mitigate a lot of the damage we're taking from the self-harm, and that will help out a lot. Also, duration stacking shenanigans seem to be more feasible this league with the new base type, so there's some options there. Pathfinder can get really high resistances from flasks, so we have potential for wearing some absolutely terrible gear for resistances, and I think that we do enough damage that we don't have to worry too much around the Droughtbringers. Lastly, Flagellant Flasks don't work with Bone Shatter. Don't try it. Doesn't work. Not unless you are using like Hiltless. And if you're using Hiltless, good luck, buddy. It's not gonna be a lot of fun. But that's my plan. It's low on the uniques. I think it does enough damage. It's something new, and I'm experimenting with some new skills for me. I have some exits in case things feel awful. But I think that the physical Bone Shatter is probably going to carry me quite a ways before I'll start exploring some of the other options.